Yeah, live, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to Dr. KK's Heart Care Foundation of India's Perfect Health Mela. This session, ANMOL, is very close to our heart. We have entries from a number of children with different abilities performing. We have some melodious singing, rhythmic dancing, and brilliant painting. I'm in conversation with Ms. Rubina Mohan, a rehabilitation psychologist working with persons of special needs and their families. Welcome, Rubina. Do tell us a little about your work.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been working for 23 years with persons with special needs, specifically with intellectually challenged young adults. So it is a highly rewarding task, and you always get a chance to think out of the box. But what is, I would say, one of the biggest challenges that we see is how the opportunities that they deserve or they need are very limited or very inaccessible to them. So that's the change that I'm trying to make for the last 23 years, and I've been very lucky to work with people and organizations. Presently, I head Shaurya Foundation Trust, which is a unique organization working very specifically for intellectually challenged young adults, creating new models, creating new styles of working, and very importantly, doing work for independent living. So I would love to watch the videos that you were mentioning, ma'am. So
Definitely. Ritu, can we show them a clip of some of the entries that we have received?
Yes, ma'am. Can we start with yoga, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Wow. Fantastic. Wow. Wow.
Wow.
Rubina, these children were mostly with eyesight impairment, and they can't see very well, and to still have this kind of coordination was really amazing for me. And they
Amazing.
were really, really good. As we know, these children may have intellectual disabilities, but they're extremely talented in other fields. Unfortunately, instead of encouraging them, most people tend to just pity them or neglect them. What are the challenges that they face, especially when it comes to inclusion in society?
Right, ma'am. So one of the things that you saw even in the video, that the only disability in life really is a bad attitude. You don't
That's right.
really, anything that can stop you is your belief, your own belief that, I'm not capable. So
Right.
those are the main, if I was to technically look at it, then the major barriers would be more, you could put them in 4 types actually. There are physical barriers, there are attitudinal barriers, there are institutional barriers, as well as communication barriers. Those are the 4 major types of barriers. But in India, we actually think the biggest barrier actually is the attitudinal barrier.
Definitely.
Yeah, as you were also mentioning, that majority of us, or I would include myself, because when we were studying or when we were younger, We
Yeah.
actually never gave disability a thought, or we were not really, or if you saw someone with disability, you would immediately start want to help them or start pitying them or start feeling sympathy for them.
Yeah.
You know, their disability is much more, it's right in front of us. We forget that the person is there. We look at what is missing. We don't look at the fact that there is a whole being behind this. So that continues. In addition to that, here we also have a lot of, I would say, in fact, we are in this phase where we are thinking of Diwali and thinking of all our festivals. Even in our scriptures and all these stories, a lot of people who are playing the villain or villainous roles are usually people with some kind of impairment. You would have a Shakuni or a mantra or somebody. So there is no understand. But it's almost like something that we don't realize. But it
Right.
seems that we have it as part of our culture also. That it's very reiterated, very, it's very subtle, but it's all around us.
It's all around.
Yeah, is disability or any impairment is actually आपके पापों का, आपके कर्मों का फल है, पिछले कुछ जन्मों का कुछ है. So you can imagine that when we are working in urban India, people have had a lot of education and they have had much more exposure. But when we are in rural India or otherwise, these subtle messages seem to have taken a very, very firm hold.
Quite
So,
frankly, even in the urban centers, I see these preconceived notions,
yes.
and very few people are willing to encourage them and involve them.
Yes.
How can we? I mean, as you were saying, what the difficulties they face are immense.
Yes. So in terms, I think, ma'am, in the last 20 years, particularly, a lot of policy changes have happened. There is a
Yeah.
lot of work which has happened in terms, we have a new act. We had a People with Disability Act which came in. So there is at least some, we have something to go back to. Otherwise, the disability sector actually had nothing to address its concerns. So when this act came about, obviously there were a lot of minuses in it. There were a lot of problems in it. So we have just had a revision, so which is 2016, and there are a lot of things have changed then. So that has helped. But again, this is just an act. This is like,
Does it really help?
I think, ma'am, it's very important to have policy backing.
Right.
If you do not have that, if you do not have the framework to work within, on the ground, I don't think things have changed as much.
Right.
But otherwise we had nothing to refer it to.
Okay.
So in the sector, at least there is this movement, and there is a lot of, at least concerns are being taken up. In fact, before 2011, disability was not even considered or counted. There was no census.
Right.
So if you do not have any numbers, how can any
It's
policy?
like you're not acknowledging them at all.
And so you cannot even, how can you design a policy also? What is
Right.
in their interest when you don't have the facts in front of you? So 2011 onwards, there was a lot of work which I would say our co-activists or co-workers or co-colleagues did, that they got this included. And then now we actually have some facts and figures that we are working with. But yes, it's very skewed. In fact, just before coming on, I was trying to check what are the numbers of people with disability in India today, and you get figures like 2.68 crores to 7 crores, and then you have 12 million, so 12 crores even. So it's like the figures are still a little sketchy. You can never rely on them. But what we see on the ground is that I'm sure all of us actually know a lot of people with challenge, and we would, in fact, I would have loved to ask the audience, how many people with challenge do you know, or people with disability do
I
you
would
know?
request our participants to please reply on this on chat. Please don't unmute yourselves and answer, because that will create a problem. But do reply on the chat
You can,
if you'd like to.
to start thinking, it will be a good exercise to do.
Right.
That we also meet a lot of young people who have never actually met somebody with challenge. But when you start probing, you realize that it is not as if they didn't know, they had just not considered them.
Considered them.
They
So
are
what
not.
would you say? Is it they've not considered them because they consider them to be similar to themselves, disregarding the disability, or they just don't acknowledge them at all?
They just. It's almost like, ma'am, It's like if I am, say, we gravitate towards people who are like us.
Right.
Right. So if the other person is not like me, I would just ignore them. I don't even see them. So we use a term called an invisible minority. There is so much of disability around us,
Right.
but we just don't see it. We just, because we are so busy with our own set of things. And secondly, we don't see any role for us. We don't have to do anything. It's their problem. They are the ones. If they can't climb the stairs,
It's their problem.
it's their
Okay.
problem. So
Okay.
they,
But, Rubina, especially since you work with a lot of children with intellectual disabilities, what are the major roadblocks that you have found for their progress, apart from attitude?
in fact, I would say, ma'am, ki within the disability sector itself, I would say ki they are the most marginalized because they actually do not have any access to any kind of services at all. If you were to go through figures again, so the kind of we have policies now that inclusion hai, inclusive education is accessible, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan was there and all that. So out of all this also, when we actually have, on the ground that we see, कि despite all this, persons with intellectual challenge or with multiple disability, both actually, have almost zero access to educational services also.
But hasn't it been made compulsory for schools to accept
Yeah.
these children
Yes, it is.
and teach them along with the other students?
It is compulsory, ma'am. But on the ground, it actually doesn't translate.
Okay.
The fact is that their challenges are such that they do not benefit from the regular style of teaching. So
Do
even
these
if
schools have specialized teachers for them?
as per law, all schools are supposed to have one special educator, and then there are 21 kinds of disabilities.
Oh, so you can't have one educator for all of them.
Absolutely, and it's a visual impairment requires, the teacher must know
Different.
it. They should be able to do that. For hearing impairment, they must know sign language. For somebody with the intellectual disability, they must actually have a very, very tactile, very, multi-sensorial approach they must take, and they should also understand within intellectual disability there will be at least 100 kind of syndromes. It's the fact is that even if we kind of create these categories, every individual is very different.
Right.
And so you need time to understand what is this person's needs. And this is true for all children. I'm not even saying that for people with challenge, it is uniquely important. But what is definitely that other children cope. These children do not even have the coping capacities. So those have to be built.
Right.
And that is what gets lost when we kind of try and put them all together in all the services that are being provided. So what we realized is that even if they go into school and they drop out, school is unable to cope with their behaviors or whatever issues that they might be cropping up with. So a lot of other children get, their behavior issues are so severe that they kind of escalate in such a manner that schools cannot really cope with them, and therefore they withdraw them or children have to leave or otherwise. So they're not really benefiting from the curriculums that are being run for them. So the
No,
standard
but Rubina, I'd like to understand, does it make sense to have them do subjects like science and social studies and maths rather than have something which would lead them to a livelihood?
Absolutely, ma'am. So I would say I will just break it down a little bit. That there is obviously from 0 to 6 you would need some early intervention inputs to come in, right?
Right.
So early intervention is where you will prep them, you will make them school ready, at least being able to attend school. If there are children who have access to these services, cope better. Then you have primary schools, which again need to have, most children actually do fairly okay in a primary setup, which is supportive. But it is when the academic pressures start, that's when they start to fall away. This would be true for high functioning people. Within the categories also, you have different categories of children who are borderline, children who cannot understand, there is moderate capacity where you will be trainable, but you will not be able to do academics very well, but you might be able to do the basics. And then there is a severe category who do not really benefit from academic inputs, like where you kind of send them to school. So that's the category where you need to do functional very, very soon. There is no real point in trying to teach them academic skills. It would be important. But for majority of them, we also have data which says ki even after having finished 12th grade, having done open schools, a lot of them are able to cope. Open school has been was started for different purposes, but has been a boon for people with intellectual challenge and learning disability because they give them a lot of time to finish the curriculum, and there is a lot of adaptive. You can also break down. You don't have to take all the exams in one go.
You go at your pace.
Yes, so it's actually worked out very well. But even after they achieve all this, we actually work at Shaurya. We presently have 2 graduates. These are people with intellectual disability, or I would say learning difficulties. Dyspraxia hai, ADHD hai. These kids have been able to finish their academics. But their social skills are so poor that being able to hold a job is very difficult. So
is that because of their lack of social skills or because of their intelligence quotient?
I would say, ma'am, intelligence quotient is on the task. Like say they can do data entry. They're doing very well with data entry, but they are, they get into trouble when the supervisor is giving them feedback, and if it is not direct feedback, it's sarcastic comment. They have no clue what you mean.
What do you mean? Okay.
Then the fact is that most of them have had such intense training that they don't really have peer skills, being able to function in a peer group. So we will be really, we have had a lot of our students who have gone out for open employment, but in a year or two, they tend to feel so isolated.
Okay.
They don't really have peer groups in their workspaces. They don't really have, the same kind of bit of knowledge in terms like getting into political debates, because they don't really have access to that kind of information. They can't process all of that. In addition to that, it is also making the right and wrong choices. Like a lot of young people are into drinking. We actually had this incident that this young lady was working for one of the plush malls in Delhi, and then there was an office party. So office parties with drinks, of course. So they were not invited to that party.
Oh, they were not invited only.
Because, and it was a very conscious decision, because there is no way that they could have protected her. That if people are drinking around and if she was to drink, and then what are the repercussions and everything. So inclusion, if I may go back to that, inclusion has to work in so many, like it has to be almost like we have to all consciously decide to think about others. It is not only what is good for me and what is going to be for me only. Being aware of another person, being aware of other person's needs is what would mean inclusion actually.
So we have to become more sensitive to their needs.
Absolutely, ma'am. And I think also becoming aware, not only needs, हमें कम से कम aware होना चाहिए कि what would be other person's challenge in this? What would be, just acknowledging another person for the person he or she is. We also joke about it in the sector that we spend so much time normalizing our young people that there is also this need for all of us to reach this normal side. The fact is that normal is a myth. There is nothing like a normal. All of us are unique in the way that we are. So acknowledging, accepting that would be a much better framework to work with. So
but Rubina, do you feel that the COVID pandemic has deterred their progress even more? Social skills have even become worse because they're not interacting at all now?
Actually, ma'am, I don't know how many of us were able to experience this, but the fact that the lockdown had its impacts on all of us, right?
Right.
But the persons with disabilities, actually their world narrowed down so drastically.
Right.
They actually had a small world, and it became worse. In fact, even access to medical services, if I may share some anecdotes here. The fact that a lot of people with autism have severe sensory needs. So getting this vaccination is such a task. क्योंकि वो एक तो getting a swab test done is impossible.
Impossible, right?
Then there were these cases where there was a person with Down syndrome who actually contracted COVID, and that person is non-verbal. And if he is admitted to a hospital, how exactly will the doctors know if he is what is the status? वो सांस लेने में आपको दिक्कत हो रहा है, कैसे बताएगा कोई?
Right.
So the fact that in this case, so this was a case in Bombay where the parent was then given special permission to go live in the same ward and everything. We actually had an incident with one of our own young people here. The isolation wards were actually where you were put and you were supposed to look after yourself, right? You were supposed to have a bath yourself because there were nobody.
They can't do that. They can't do that.
Absolutely. So that family actually had aged parents and this young person themselves. So all three of them had COVID. They were in two different isolation wards. And this person deteriorated further because he could not feed himself.
Oh.
Not actually because there was no help available.
Right.
So because the pandemic was running its course, but the person with challenge actually had 100 million other challenges because वो tube लगाने में बहुत दिक्कत हो रहा था. We actually lost this person to the pandemic.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, his situation became much worse. His lungs were very damaged by the time we were able to find a hospital bed for him and move him to another facility and get proper, support and everything. So I think the costs are much more heavier. We also have cases right now where the people have lost both parents to COVID and then completely lost, cannot understand what they
completely abandoned. Right.
Yes, and now मतलब वहाँ से उनको move करें भी, तो imagine having, and they are so closely knit that losing a parent for any person is very, very difficult, but losing them so suddenly, and then they don't really even have an understanding of where they have landed up. Now, who is going to take care of them? The state has stepped in some places, but other places there is this, this is the nightmare of any parent. This is what I don't know if other people are aware. There is a National Trust Act where guardianship is encouraged, where parents of intellectually challenged young adults and with three other disabilities are encouraged to create guardians, so that in case of such a mishap, they will have somebody taking care of them, somebody responsible for them. But there is such a I think right now a lot of parents are actually developing toolkits in case now something was to happen immediately.
But as you said, this would be in the urban sectors. The remote sectors would still not be doing this.
Not at all. I think, ma'am, we actually have at Shaurya, we have a center in Palwal, which is semi-rural, I would say, semi-urban rather than rural. So we see a marked difference in the way parents approach their own children. And we see that the value for the person with disability is so different. Urban, हमारे लिए तो ये बहुत striking है. It's only 68 kilometers away from Delhi, but the way the person is seen and जो हम attitudinal barriers की बात कर रहे थे.
Seen by the parents or seen by others?
Both, community wise also and parents wise also. So we have had.
Rupina, what is the role that the parents and families need to play to enhance the life of these children?
I think, ma'am, for one of the most important things for the parents is to actually, I won't even blame them. Honestly, I think for the first time parent, it is not an easy task understanding what disability is. So one is awareness, getting them to be aware. One would be, I would say the medical field really needs, I would really request all the doctors who are present here or the foundation perhaps, they need to build a very hopeful picture. Not only a medical picture, what your profile is, what this disability will lead to, because you finally have to live with the challenge. So the doctors also need to build a very, create an awareness of what are the possibilities for this person now, rather than what will be the challenges for this person. So parents tend to be very ill-informed. Secondly, they do not, I think they also live in a fool's paradise for a long time. Acceptance comes much later. So they keep tackling it as on a day-to-day basis. So they are not very clear in what the paths should be. And it's not an easy thing, but I think parents need to be educated a lot more. Training has to happen. But most importantly, acceptance that there is a challenge. Acceptance.
That is what I was wondering. Do the parents shun them or accept them?
Most of the time, ma'am, generally in rural India, one of the things is that having too much information is also counterproductive. But I think
half-baked information is a real bad culprit.
I think, ma'am, what there tends to happen is that bhola hai, seedha hai, and all that, but that also tends to not expose them to what their potential will be. Right. You actually have a lot of work for them within the confines of the community. You can get them to do manual labor and everything, but there is no. It is possible that he could have studied or he could have learned other trades or skills, but they would rather do this. I can share this example that when the pandemic hit, we have a center in Delhi as well. So all the students from the Delhi center switched to the online mode.
Right.
In the Palwal center also, we started with the online mode, and I would say that 50% of the parents did transfer. They did transfer onto the online mode. But by the third month or the fourth month, actually we had a very, very serious dropout. And by the sixth month, there was 0 students online.
But why?
The fact is that yes, there was accessibility problem. There was a network issue. There was an device issue because there is one smartphone in the house. But the fact that other children needs are more important became so drastically. It was like quite mind-bogglingly clear to us that other child who is studying, उसके लिए phone free हो जाना चाहिए.
Free हो जाना चाहिए.
उसकी class का मतलब we were ready to do classes at 8 in the night, at 10 in the night also, because we were quite aware that the time that we are losing now, their learning will be like 3 months of not actually having any intervention would mean 1 year loss. So we are very, very keen that we should continue work, that we should keep in touch and we should keep working with the person. But the parents were, I say this is where I would imagine that lack of awareness ही है, कि you can't appreciate, and then you place value on your other children and say that their education is much more important. This person not getting educated, वैसे भी ये क्या सीख रहा था, it's like that. And the fact,
whereas the other kids can even handle themselves.
Yes.
But this poor child will not be able to handle himself without any intervention.
And now we will be only, they will come back with behavior issues. इसको बहुत behavior problem है, ये बात नहीं सुनता है, बहुत aggressive है. We will hear all this. हालांकि what he has had is no structure. There is no demand on him. There is no direction this person is going in. And what would you do? An idle mind is a devil's workshop.
Definitely.
It will be multiply, million times more true here. Because the parent also cannot create this structure on his own. They are not in a standard, you can't give them an ABCD book and say, ki, aap ye karo. So you have to design very different activities for them so that they are more functional and according to what their style might be of learning and everything. So I think this is a problem which has been created, and it is true for majority of young people with challenge who are being stuck home. And we hope that I am really looking forward to when the pandemic is a little more controlled and we can actually reach out. And this needs to be done almost like on a warm footing. These are extremely talented young people who are just stuck at home and losing skill by the minute. So we would like to recover, get them back on track as soon as we can. That would be really, really important.
Rubina, what can we as a society do for these children?
So I am really happy that you have asked me this, because our biggest, as I said in the beginning, I've been in the sector for almost 23 years now.
Yeah.
So what we have been seeing is this skill learning is is not a problem for people with intellectual challenge, very, very specifically. And I would even say that for the severely challenged, we have had absolutely beautiful results. They learn skills very, very well, and they learn, you obviously need to give them the kind of support that they need. But there is no lack of skills. Where we actually get stuck is that after having been skilled as well, they do not have any any place to move out to. Like if you are going to an engineering college, you finish engineering and then you get jobs.
Get a job.
Move out. Here they will work million times harder, skill themselves, but there is no real opportunity out there. So at Shaurya,
people are not employing them.
They are, ma'am, but only in the businesses, it's almost like high functioning boys and girls do find employment. But I would say that the rate of employment for people with intellectual challenge is 0.02 or 0.05, I think.
Oh God.
Out of all those who actually access services, they say we only 0.5 or 0.7 or 0.5, I think, are the ones who actually end up with jobs. And this is high functioning people who are low functioning or say severely challenged actually do not reach anywhere. So they continue to be in vocational training forever. So I've been very
Rubina, in your center, you train them to make matris, to bake and all. You don't find these children going ahead and working in shops or anything?
Actually, ma'am, we have tried it. We have, as I said, we were very keen for open employment and stuff. We have done open employment. And I would also, my rate is also at Shaurya is similar to what the pan-India rate is. So out of all the students, 0.5, 0.2, I would say 2% perhaps, if I was to be very, very liberal with my, analysis. So out of all the students that we have trained, 2 to 5% we have found placements. And these are all high functioning boys and girls, but lot of them actually have, they start to feel very lonely after 2-3 years.
Because they're not able to interact with the others at the workplace?
No, in addition to that, ma'am, no promotions come around. There has to be constant retraining because they obviously just can't learn on the job.
Right.
When they're, you need to diversify, learn new skills. So retrainings are required. And I would say that's where I would want that the employer should be more sensitive to their need. And the fact that a lot of people employ them just to fill their quotas.
I would say, like, we feel so happy when we've picked up diyas that have been painted by these kids and all, but I don't think that's enough.
No,
that is what troubles me. That it's not enough.
I think Shaurya, we finally came to the conclusion that we need to set up social enterprises so that we become employers ourselves. We cannot expect businesses to, kind of create, जैसे हम special educator के लिए कह रहे थे कि one educator cannot cater to everybody's needs.
That's true.
Similarly, one business house perhaps cannot cater to the needs of all kinds of people with challenge. They cannot be accommodating everybody's needs, right? And I understand and I appreciate businesses where they are, creating opportunities for people with visual impairment or creating opportunities for hearing impaired because those are on track, right? They are educable, they learn faster, there is no intellectual challenge. So all those things, we are very much with that. But for the intellectually challenged, I believe it is harder for businesses to adapt. It is harder for businesses to provide accommodations, mentors, constant support that they will need. So now after having, we were really very strong supporters of open employment and rights and all that. But I think now pragmatism has taken hold. So with age, it happens. So we believe that the business has to be our business, which will cater to their needs. It will be designed in the way that they can actually really perform the task that they can. But we will always need to be a successful business. We need clients, we need takers. People who would make a conscious choice of buying from us rather than from any other, business house as such. So I
remember talking to you about starting a cafeteria at your Palwal center and
Yes.
employing these children on a long-time basis.
I think, ma'am, ki that's a very close to our heart kind of a project, because we have figured out that you can't really take autism out of someone, you can't take ADHD out of someone, or you can't take intellectual disability out of someone. They will. These are lifelong conditions. They will continue to have them. So expecting an ADHD or an attention deficit hyperactive person to sit for 8 hours and continuously do one task is not fair. It's not a demand that I would place on anybody else. It's almost like asking someone जिसका हाथ नहीं है कि तुम इसी हाथ से लिखो. It's like it's not something that this person is designed for. Yes, he's not designed like that. Capable वो शायद हो जाएगा. कर लेगा मतलब, but it is punishment for him. It's like कि ये chair uncomfortable में, but तुम बैठे हो
बैठे रहो इसमें.
So it's like asking, and I think we have also come to, we have to accept that this is the way they are, and there is no right and wrong about this. So what we need to do is design work in such a fashion that their basic intrinsic needs are respected.
So tell me, all these companies have this CSR initiatives.
Ji.
Are they interested in doing something for these children or no?
Ma'am, I think now I think there is much more capacity, or the CSRs are looking at this. But again, disability sector, as I said, 21 disabilities. So there is, even we are competing within this. So, and it's almost like wherever and the business has to match. You can't really, finally you don't want somebody's sympathy. You don't want कि आपने सिर्फ नाम पे रख लिया या नाम के लिए कर लिया. So we believe कि yes, we will have to create many more successful models for even the businesses to be interested. That's where the CSR funding is very welcome. If they, rather than employments or otherwise, if they can help us create a business model where their needs are respected, as a cafe आपने mention किया था, so I was just going to share with that what we finally are. We already have the blueprint and everything. We are very much looking for an investor, I would say. Somebody could invest the money. Is ki 8-hour duty can be divided up into 2 hours duty.
Right.
Task to wahi karna hai, but you will generate much more employment, and the students or the young people will be able to, they'll be capable of managing that much. And then, simultaneously, they'll all get employment. But I can't ask any other restaurant chain to do that.
No, they won't do it.
They will not. And then they are also stuck by the norms that have been set for restaurant running. You need to have safety.
Although I do know of one restaurant in which all the servers are visually impaired.
Yes, ma'am.
They have
there are hearing impaired. Yes, hearing impairment. So काफी cafe business में तो बहुत hearing impairment पे बहुत high rate of employment है. But we are looking primarily for intellectually disabled, and I also refer to, when I mention this, is people with learning disabilities, people with autism, people with all kinds of, where they have cognitive impairment and they're not very, education-wise or formal education has not helped them. So, and we, as I was sharing, that even if they have formal degrees, they do not have the skills of actually performing a job. So that is why my main request, I would say, to the audience here would be that it is much better to spend time in learning skills than to fill copy and pencil से आप किताबें पढ़ते रहें. उससे better है कि आप functional skills सीखें, life skills सीखें. So if you are ever talking to a parent or you meet someone, it will be really nice if you can guide and advise them that functional training and functional learning will be much more productive. I have students who come at 18, 19 to us with zero skills. They don't even know how to hold a pencil properly. They don't know how to use scissors. They don't know how to use a punching machine. They don't know how to use a knife. They can't even clothe themselves. There is no point of having been in school till 18 and having no life skills. So how are you going to lead your life? At Shaurya, we also see that 18 to till the time you're alive is the longest lifespan you have.
Right.
And if you don't have anything productive to do in that, what are you going to achieve?
And also at that age, you may end up losing your support system.
Absolutely.
Your elders and those around you you may end up losing them. So you need to be all the more confident to be able to lead things yourself.
Absolutely. So having an experience of life of being on your own, of actually coping. I believe a lot of our training in the rehabilitation sector is also leading them to become dependent. That somebody will be taking care of you.
Yeah.
I think that mindset has to change completely. You can play a productive role. There is nothing that can stop them. If we give them appropriate training, there is no reason that they should end up being dependent. Yes, it's a much harder role. It's much easier to just create someone जहाँ पे आप उनका ध्यान रख लेंगे, हम एक center बना देते हैं, वहाँ डाल देते हैं, and then we can all go and give khana there. That will make us all, I don't think it's such a waste of human resource. They are the most dedicated workers. Even in the pandemic, we have had students who are like, fighting with their parents. We have to go and we have to do work. There is their work to be done. It's a big problem agar chutti lena pad jaye to. I'm sure none of you have workers like this. The workers are fighting कि हमें काम पे जाना है. So, I think we are close to our finishing time. So, may I request for a video that I wanted to share with the audience?
Please share Rubina's video.
Because we have had this beautiful experience of independent living. There are these set of boys who are living in our facility. We have a graduation program where they're learning to live completely independently, and we are very confident that once they graduate out, they'll be living on their own. So and these are like people with, and I would say even people with severe challenges. We have seen this remarkable transformation in them. So we are more and more confident that what we are telling you is going to happen. So let me just leave you with this.
Sabriyan, besabriyan, besabriyan, कदमों पे तेरे बादल झुकेंगे जब तक तुझे एहसास है जागीर तेरी तेरा खजाना ये तश्नगी है ये प्यास है क्यों रोकना अब ये कारवां जाए वही ले जाए जहां बेसब्रियां 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 क्या ये उजाले क्या ये अंधेरे दोनों से आगे है मंजर तेरे क्यों रोशनी तू बाहर तलाशे तेरी मशाले अंदर तेरे क्यों ढूंढना पैरों के निशान जाए वही ले जाए जहां बेसब्रियां बेसब्रियां बेसब्रियां
Thank you so much, Rubina, for sensitizing us to some of the problems that these children face. You know, quite frankly, we never even think about these things at times. And we can only hope that together we can build a better society for them and to enhance their world too. Thank you so much, Rubina.
Thank you.
Ritu, can you take over, please?
Friends, medicine is one area which needs lot of change. After all, change, you know, if you go to the dictionary and see what life is, ceaseless change till death. You keep on changing every day. And with that, society also changes. And we need change a lot. I always say, don't go to the doctor for asking for health.